The Middle East Institute presents Helena Cobban addressing Who Speaks for the Palestinians at the negotiating table.
And now please join me in welcoming Helena Cobban.
It's such a pleasure to be here for a number of reasons, one of which it's always fun to come to an organization run by women. Just, makes a change after a whole life of the other. Anyway, want to do that again. I want to start out with a couple of quotes from what our president has been saying in the last couple of days. Yesterday at the United Nations, in case you missed this, he said, "The time has come to relaunch negotiations without preconditions that address the permanent status issues, security for Israelis and Palestinians, borders, refugees, and Jerusalem. And the goal is clear: two states living side by side in peace." Later he said, "The United States does Israel no favors when we fail to couple an unwavering commitment to its security with an insistence that Israel respect the legitimate claims and rights of the Palestinians." And on Tuesday, after his meeting with Netanyahu and Abbas, he made the following critical statement, important that is: "It's not just critical for the Israelis and the Palestinians, it is critical for the world. It is in the interests of the United States reaching the final Israeli-Palestinian peace." An important statement, assertion that this is in our national interest and not just that of the two parties themselves. And we are going to work as hard as necessary to accomplish our goals. This signals a real change from the prevailing wisdom under President Clinton, and to a lesser extent wisdom under George W. Bush, which was that we can't, as Americans, want peace more than the parties themselves, which of course allows the parties to stall endlessly. And as much as the American president can argue that we see that peace is in the interest of our Israeli friends, all it takes is an Israeli prime minister to stand up and say, well, we don't, and that's kind of the end of it. But if we have a president in this country who stands up and says this is in our national interest, and we also believe it's in the national interest in the interest of the Israelis and Palestinians, then I think that positions him, or in the future perhaps her, quite correctly to pursue this important diplomacy. In fact, I think the United States needs, and its international partners, need to move to a posture of dominating and driving this peacemaking, because the model of leaving the two parties in the room to sort it out between themselves has proven itself unsuccessful over 16 years. My good friend Jonathan Kutab, who's a Palestinian lawyer, said this model of leaving the two parties in the room by themselves to sort it out is like putting a sumo wrestler and a kindergarten child in a room together. One of them is evidently going to win. That's another reason that the external parties need to dominate and drive this process. I'm going to come to the Palestinian part of this, but since we have a policy context, I thought I would just preface it with these couple of remarks about what I think President Obama needs to do. I think he needs to spell out 4 key things. The first is, as I mentioned earlier, that it is in the national interest of the United States not just to pursue a peace process, but to secure the peace agreement and its implementation. Obama has gone some way towards saying that, but he hasn't talked about it. He's talked about it being in our interest to pursue the process. He hasn't spelled out that it's in our interest to complete the process. Secondly, the US needs to spell out its readiness to use all the levers of national power to achieve this important national interest. Don't need to spell them out in detail, but just to quietly assert it, just as we use the levers of our national power to try to shape Palestinian behavior or the behavior of many other actors around the world. the levers of national power should be used to shape behavior of the Israeli government, for example. Thirdly, the president clearly needs to spell out a very robust and compelling vision of the region at peace and what it could become, the kind of vision that many of us over the years have worked on. What could this region become? And I don't think he's done that enough yet. And fourthly, he needs to spell out the basic principles on which the settlement effort will be based. He's mentioned the June 4th, 1967 line. He's mentioned the Arab Peace Initiative. All these things, I think, need to be re-stressed again and again for reasons that will become clear later. Now, it has been said that both parties have a dysfunctional politics that is incapable of responding to the president's initiative. I'm not going to speak very much at all to the Israeli part of this, although I did publish a piece recently on the decline of the Israeli peace movement. That was in Boston Review, and I've done quite a lot of writing and interviewing about internal Israeli politics. But what I really want to talk about here is the Palestinian side, looking in particular at the roles played by Fatah, Hamas, and Salam Fayyad. Now, I think we need to start off by recognizing that it's particularly difficult for Abu Mazen to participate in the negotiations right now, given the US's failure to achieve the settlement freeze. If, you know, as one has seen the arguments, if Obama can't even get a temporary settlement freeze from Netanyahu, how on earth is he going to get a final peace agreement? That's why I think Obama needs to demonstrate his seriousness to Abu Mazen and to the Arab parties, all of whom have great skepticism about his seriousness, needs to demonstrate it with the kind of assertive statements that I outlined at the beginning, if he is to be credible. There are two questions about Abu Mazen at the present. First of all, can he negotiate? Secondly, can he negotiate authoritatively, that is, negotiate and close and enforce a deal? They are very separate questions. My guess on the first one is, can he negotiate? Does he feel that he's able to negotiate in spite of the president's failure on the settlement freeze? I think, yes, he will find a way. He's a person, Abu Mazen, I've known him for 25 years in one way or another, generally sort of as a sidekick to Arafat, as he was for so many years. But he was, in a sense, the author of the entire Palestinian diplomatic initiative from the 1980s onward. He was the person who developed the theoretical aspect that we have to hug the Israelis and hug the Israelis, as he told us in Tunis back in the 1980s, until they see no alternative but to make peace with us. Well, as the author of this approach, his name is inextricably linked to this approach, has been for 25 years now. Sadly, he has had nothing to show for it. Oslo, which was his baby, looked like a good reward for his approach, but rapidly proved not to be one because the Israelis carried on building settlements and carried on not complying with the deadline, for example, on Oslo to complete the final status negotiations. Remember that now in 2009 we are 10 years and some months behind the deadline that was specified and spelled out in Oslo for the completion, not just the start, but the completion of the final peace agreement. So there is a sense of enormous frustration on the Palestinian side. But anyway, I think he will be able to enter negotiations because of his lifelong commitment to the concept and because of his intense dependence, let's face it, on US power and money to stay in power himself.